Welcome everyone, this is Pineleaf News and you're listening to LOTRO Players News, where we take a look at losers in LOTRO and here at LOTRO Players. And this week we have with us Cinders!
Hello!
Hello there, Cinders. Are you ready to go through with what's coming up? Mainly what's going through Bulwer?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. That's right. We had another Bulwer build, beta number 4 for update 39 as we get closer and closer towards the release of update 39, which rumor says that they're shooting for the 12th, but we will see whether or not that's the case because we know that sometimes things go wrong.
Anything that can, will.
Yes. Well, first off, we had another preview of the Streets of Rahalbach, and this is the new 3-player instance. This is the first one in which I was able to get an opportunity to play, and it seems to be working reasonably well, though I think I heard there are a couple of issues in some of the higher tiers that still need to be smoothed out before the release, and I really liked this one. This is actually a continuation of the Vile storyline.
Oh, that would be interesting to see.
Yeah, so I look forward to have a chance to do this one with you after the release.
That'll be fun.
Okay. And of course, that adds with time. I did not have a chance to do the Isle of Storms again, so it's been a while since I've tried that one, so maybe I'll wait until the release before I see whether or not they've got that more to a level that's my liking. Now, they are also doing some previews relating to this, which I'll get into later. Now, what other changes did we have? Not many of them. Most of them having to do with missions and delvings, where the Epic Malice Orc Tunnels is activated now at 90 seconds and spawns 3 enemies once every 30 seconds. They're trying to fine-tune how difficult and challenging to make that particular malice it looks like. Auron's Defense 2 now reflects 30% of damage instead of 45%. Sauron's Defense 2 is a corruption, and when removed, no longer re-adds a lower tier of Sauron's Defense. Lingering Fear now subtracts 50% of incoming healing, down from 90%, and has a cap of 2 effects at once on a player.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. Sorry, that would have to be better if they capped that and brought it down from 90%.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, it's still saying, though, that if it's a cap of 2 and it subtracts 50% of incoming healing, isn't that 100%? So,
well, I'm guessing it's more like 75%.
Okay, so you're...
I'm thinking it's probably 50 and then another half of whatever that is.
Okay, so I was thinking literally subtracting half of the base value, so you're thinking maybe it's subtracting 50 of the current remaining value.
Yeah.
Okay. And the Delving Malices, Encroaching Shadow, and Slime Puddles 2 have had their base effects increased slightly. The following Delving Malices have had their capped number of effects per player reduced: Disease Cloud 1, Disease Cloud 2, Firestorm 1, Firestorm 2, Poison Puddles 1, Poison Puddles 2, Slime Puddles 1 and 2, Encroaching Shadows, Explosive Devastation 1 and 2. Each effect has been reduced from a cap of 3 to 6 effects down to a max of 2 per player. Thank you, because those puddles are annoying enough as it is. And for miscellaneous, they're also taking several translations for NPC occupation titles are being updated in French and German. And that's it. So yes, fewer notes this time than previously. So it looks like we are getting closer. So I'm expecting in 10 days we will be actually able to run all of this.
Yay!
Then, speaking of previews, they have posted a new video, Update 39 Arenas of Conflict. they have posted a YouTube video showing a preview of this where they go through several of the instances. They didn't try to do it in grand detail simply because, well, there were some spoilers in it as a result of what they're going into, but they were trying to avoid having any complete spoilers in there, shall you say. So they didn't do too much in showing what was going on in the raid, for example, because the raid is sort of a continuation of the epic storyline. And of course, they want to avoid giving too many spoilers. But they did show a glimpse in the raid, but they went a little bit more detail in the early parts of the other three. Just so you can see what the space is like, and they could go about talking about the rationale for each of these instances. And finally, the curator is back and will remain back until March the 10th.
Whoop, whoop.
So if you need to get any of your hobby horses or anything like that, this is the time to do it.
Everybody needs a hobby horse, especially if you have a high elf.
Especially if you have a high elf.
Yes. Because they're supposed to be like, so, I don't know if mature is the word, but so like reserved. You know, like you have this idea in your mind that elves are like really reserved and they're almost somebody you treat reverently, right? Because of this. And then you get them on a hobby horse where they ride around slapping their rear, and it's just the best thing to watch.
All right, this is a 5,000-year-old elf going on through on a hobby horse.
Yep, releasing their inner child.
Releasing their inner child. Well, it's been a few millennia since they were a child.
Say it. If you have a hobby horse, you too can release your inner child.
Well then, is there anything in the store sales this week that will help you to release your inner child?
Well, potentially. So, store sales include loot box keys, which let you open those fantastic loot boxes, which do sometimes have things that allow you to release your inner child, whether it's playing dress up or conquering dragons. Or even possibly getting like a little hobby horse itself. I don't know if they still drop horses, but sometimes they used to. I haven't paid that much attention lately to the loot boxes because most of my characters have them filtered because it was too hard to get the keys.
Yeah.
So then you can also get universal solvents, some universal morale and power potions for slaying dragons. To help you with that, some deed boosts, which are also fantastic when you are in a slaying mood, through March 7th. And then the weekly coupon is for a free universal solvent. The coupon code is CRAFTESS, which is CRAFTESS, now through March 7th.
Craft essences, yes. So, with that concluded, let's head into our new player question for the week, which comes from Ravi. And what does Ravi ask?
Ravi would like to know how one goes about talking and socializing with other people in the game, and how you can go about it if you don't know anyone. And so, after a little bit of conversation earlier, Pineleaf said, I hope you have an answer. I said, well, I can tell you what I have done and what I've heard Sans has done. So what I have learned about this game in particular is that people are generally friendly. So if you feel like talking to somebody, you are more than welcome to do that. I've gotten compliments from random players on M's outfit, telling me that she's adorable. We've been asked, Pineleaf and I have been asked how the fishing was going, just this week, by somebody that we didn't know. But for me, most of the time, if I'm going to reach out to somebody, it's because I'm in the middle of doing something and I see that they're also doing something similar. And I just say, hey, would you like to do this with me? Which works out well. I know, some players will do like the pickups, the pickup grouping for, and as ways to meet new people. And I think to probably a significant extent, that's how some of the podcast members over the years have actually found groups and made new friends. I kind of had an automatic in with Sans being my sister, but Sans got connected through listening to the podcast, and then she was kind of lurking in the listeners, and then got invited to talk and met all of the folks, and got involved that way. So there's lots of different ways. Biggest thing is just make sure you're being polite. I mean, obviously nobody likes to be cussed at or yelled at, like with everything in all caps. So, I mean, avoid that if you can help it. But I don't think there's any reason to be concerned. But also, I mean, sometimes if somebody doesn't want to talk to you, they just won't respond. But people should typically be polite. And I know for myself, and I'm not going to speak for you, Pineleaf, but for myself, like if somebody messages me in game, like with a tell, I will respond to it. If I'm in the process of logging off, that's different, but then you'll see that I'm no longer connected, and it's not a case of being intentionally ignoring somebody.
Okay. Now, one of the other things you can do, though, sometimes it's tough to do if you don't know too many people on the server, is you could attempt to join a kin.
Yes.
That could get you some connections, perhaps. The tricky thing is finding a kin.
Yes, and I know a lot of people do come to LOTRO through Corey Olson, and so sometimes they will choose like to join Mythgard. Sometimes if you get really into raiding, looking at the wiki for some kins that are open and looking for people, that's a good place to find it. And even kind of looking through some of maybe the older posts on when they did the news page. A lot of times there'd be something in there from kins that were recruiting, and so those would be kin names that might be worth looking into and seeing if they're still recruiting, if it seemed like something you'd be interested in doing.
Yes, very often you could find information about kins that are recruiting on the forums.
Yep.
Because the forums have a section in there. Let's see if I could find it. Yeah, there's one called Kinships, for example.
Mm-hmm. So,
and very often you'll find recruitment posts in there.
Yeah. And by and large, though, don't be afraid. People are nice. I think that would be my biggest thing, is just approach them like you would if you saw them, walking down the street. Not that everybody does that, but like, I probably shouldn't say that, just because I would do that doesn't mean other people would. But I know, like, when I get sent to conferences or stuff for work, like, one of the first things I'm doing is I'm looking for somebody that I can, like, compliment on something. So, at one of the most recent conferences that I got to attend, there was a lady who had, like, a really vibrant blue streak in her hair. And I thought that was the coolest thing. I said, "Oh my goodness, I love the color in your hair. Like, that's just fantastic. It's so happy." And she was just like, "Oh, thank you so much." Then we got to talking, and she ended up being a session lead, so I went to one of her sessions. So like, it's that same kind of a thing. Like, the people who come up to me and they're like, "Oh, Em's so adorable. She's the cutest little hobbit." Like, I'm like, "Oh, thank you." Like, that's never a bad way to approach somebody with a compliment. Just start it off positive.
I know that some people like to start conversations with emotes or something like that. This week, I actually had Cordovan actually waved at me while I was fishing in Jack's Funnel.
Nice. The only caveat to this, I should put in this caveat.
Okay.
If the person has a white name instead of the usual yellow or gold name, just be aware that they might not interact with you in the same way that you might interact with somebody now, because they are role playing as their character. And so they may they may interact just a little bit differently with you than how they would if they were just being themselves.
In other words, they're more likely to be in character.
They're much more likely to be in character, so just kind of keep that in mind as you approach people too. That was the only other thing, the only thing that Sans cautioned me about was just if you do approach somebody like that, be prepared to roleplay as your own character because they're trying to be immersed in the world. So.
All right. Thank you. And now that came from Robbie. I believe you also brought us our little reminiscing about question this week.
Yes.
What's this all about?
So, I'll kind of briefly fill in the details and then we'll get into Robbie's letter a little bit further down. But Robbie is a relatively new player, but has already picked up a couple of things by going back and listening to some of the older podcasts that we have. And then listening to the more current ones. And one of the things that Robbie has noticed is that at some point Strider wasn't the one who rescues you from jail in Archit. And I didn't know this, so Pineleaf, though, has definitely been around that long. And Robbie was asking if any of us had experienced the episode before that change. Could we talk about what it was like before and the reaction to having it changed that we had? And so, Pineleaf, that's all you, because I was not playing at that point, and nobody else is here either.
Yes.
So he was.
All right. Back when you first started in the game, so if you were stuck in jail in that particular area, the person who rescued you in it was not Strider, but was Omdir. Do you remember Omdir?
I do remember Omdir.
Okay. And one of the clues as to what's going on in there is if you understand what the word Omdir means. In fact, I didn't learn about this until several years later after the changeover, is that Omdir is the word for hope. It is the word meaning hope as in hope when you evaluate, and you have hope based on evaluation for a logical reason. The word for hope in the sense of faith. You have faith in something happening, but you have no logical reason to be hopeful. That word for that is Estelle. And Estelle, of course, is another name for Strider. Or Aragorn, or whatever. That's the name that I think his mother gave him when he was born after his father died. So that's one of Strider's names. You know, Strider's notorious for all the names that he's got.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So therefore, which is why Esteldine is called what it's called, is because it's named after Aragorn.
Okay.
Yes. But anyway, Estelle is hope for one reason, and the other word for hope is Omdir. So Omdir was the ranger that rescued. They had you interacting less with the main characters in there. So thus the Hobbit one did not have you interacting with Frodo, Sam, and Pippin when that one started. And in the case of this one, you did not interact with Aragorn until you got to the Prancing Pony. And that all those quests that you got weren't coming from Strider. Those quests were coming from Omdir.
Okay.
And one of the impacts of it that I had, because when they have to change, what I know a lot of people say, okay, you have a chance to interact with Aragorn. The reason for that, I believe, is when they were coming out with the free-to-play system. I can't remember whether at the free-to-play or if it was one of the first updates after the free-to-play came out. They changed it because they want, attracting new people mainly familiar with the movies and stuff like this, and they thought that bringing Aragorn at that earlier stage would be better from the point of view of marketing.
Okay.
But I think what you lose in the entire matter is your connection with Omdir, because in the current version of the story, you just don't have that same connection with Omdir that you have in the that you have in there. And of course, the tragedy of what happens to Omdir is one of the key elements of book one.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. So they did it in order because Strider is something that more people feel connected to, and so they wanted to have something you're more connected to, so they changed it to do that and lessen the role of Omdir, but though he still gets injured in that item in there. But you're wondering, okay, who's this Omdir guy and why should I care about him? Well, you care about him because he just rescued you. So that's sort of the reason that whole thing and why that becomes important in many ways in there. And thus, when the tragedy of when something happens to him, when he's taken and when he falls and all that stuff that happens after that, it's as a result of, you feel it a lot stronger than if you did because of how little role he plays in what you do. I know you interact with him some in Archit and all that stuff, but you interacted with him a lot more back in the original version in there.
That makes sense.
All right, so let's see. So yes, and yet if it used to be some different experience, so it was a different experience early on in that, and so why they changed it, I think it is because people in general feel more of a connection with Strider. They know him. They want you bring in someone familiar, and let's face it, that is someone that you very, very strongly associate with the Lord of the Rings, Strider, and that's why they brought in Sam and Sam, Frodo, and Pippin as they're walking down the lane on there, and you're running into them and the Nazgul thing. So all this stuff that happens on that end was a change in there. Ered Luin, they made changes there, but I think thematically, I don't think they made as strong a change on that side.
Yeah, I don't think so because, I feel like in the books and even in the movies, dwarves and elves are important, but they don't really drive the story in the same way that hobbits and Strider do.
Right.
And so I think that probably is why any changes that were made there, people might not have had as strong of feelings about, just because they're not associated with driving the story as much as we love them. They really do, they support it, but they don't drive it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know. They're like the tires on your car. You love them. They're really important to getting to where you want to go, but you're not going to wash and polish them with the same kind of attention as you would the body of the vehicle. I don't know. That would be how I would kind of think about it.
Right. Anyway, that is, as far as I remember what was going on in there, is that they changed it so that you feel more of a connection with the people you've heard about at an earlier stage.
Yeah.
And the disadvantage is that you lose your connection with Omdir.
And I would definitely say, though, too, if you're listening and you have an experience from before then, feel free to share it, because those are things that some of us just don't know. And would love to hear about how you reacted to it and how you felt about the changes that have happened over time.
Yes, I mean, I'm sure there's someone out there who misses the starting your Hobbit inside the Truckborough post office.
I could see that being a disappointing change.
Someone did a tongue-in-cheek comic relating to it, and of course, really Hi, Duff the Pack says, yes, this story starts where all great stories begin, in the post office.
Well, I mean, yes.
Yes. All right, let's then head into our weekend gaming. Cinders, what were you up to?
Well, primarily, I went fishing. I fished on Monday, and I am a trout master. And then today I got darter master, and I am 5 fish away from having all deeds except the farmers, or not the farmers, the festival fish done. So I have fished this week. That is what I have done. I had planned to raid last night, and that didn't work out. But yeah, sometimes life is like that. So I did, like I said, a lot of fishing, which I enjoy. So it works out well for me.
Okay.
How about you, Pineleaf? What was your weekend gaming like?
Well, I think I did some fishing. Yeah. We did a little bit of fishing in there and trying to collect some data about what spots get you what items in there. I think I'm starting to get a pretty good idea, and I was getting to the point of, all right, which areas have I not covered yet? So just before the show, I was doing Mordor.
Mm-hmm.
Just thinking, all right, Mordor, what kind of fishing table could possibly fit in Mordor? And I got there, and it was the most thematic fishing table you could possibly get, meaning it's the only fishing table in the entirety of areas that has absolutely nothing alive coming out of it.
Would you say there were no fish in Mordor?
There were no fish in Mordor, yeah.
Meat's on the menu, but not fish.
Yes, it sounds like that Schmeagol did not have a fun time in Mordor. That's all I got to say about that.
Poor Schmeagol.
In fact, I'm wondering if there's actually a reference there. Maybe he says something about there being no fish there, and maybe that's that's why they decided to do it that way. Went out of their way to do it that way.
I don't know. I feel like he's kind of one of the tired characters. You know, I didn't pay that much attention to him in the stories.
Well, there isn't exactly much good water in Mordor, so I guess there is absolutely no surprise then that
too.
That's nothing in there. And one of the stranger ones that I had also was in Osgiliath.
Oh?
Yeah, it was mostly a normal fishing table, force level, in that it was catching the fish that I would expect it. It was both the junk fish and some trout and some and other cookable fish in there. And I was thinking, okay, this is all nice and normal. Then I noticed that it didn't have the usual junk.
Oh, Osgiliath has
instead
no junk?
No, I didn't say no junk. I did say it didn't have the usual.
Oh.
Meaning so you didn't find any old boots or anything like every single junk item I pulled out in there were dirty skulls.
Ugh.
Probably due to the fact that the place has just been through a massive, massive battle. So I'm just thinking that we're just fishing out remnants from the battle. Actually, I would think that there would be rusty swords as a result of this, but no, it's just like, yeah, skulls. That's the only non-fish item that I recall pulling out of that water in there, and it was a much larger proportion of skulls than any other location I've ever seen.
Oh my
goodness. I think even more than I ran into in Mordor.
That's impressive.
Yeah, it's impressive in there anyway. So, yeah, I was finding some interesting fishing ones in there. You know, most of the evidence has nice, normal fishing patterns in there, and then you get around to the Mordor area and stuff like that, then things get a little bit on the weird side.
Yeah.
Now, for the field trip, the Mariner crew concluded our time in Angmar, so we finished the quest relating to the FemQuest line, and we finished up book 6 so that we could safely cross the line without getting killed. Then we headed up into the Angle. We've all reached level 45, so we're getting ready to do our 45 class quest, after which we have to decide what we're going to do, whether we're going to head into the Wildwood or are we going to head into Moria or what. I'm sure that the whole concept of legendary items, I don't know if they're calling to us or whether they're saying, stay away! And in Friday Night Fights, we ran some skirmishes and instances. We ran the Bells of Dale, Defense of the Prancing Pony.
Okay.
Bells of Dale's Defense of the Prancing Pony. Now, someone had asked, when it was my turn, someone said, I want to see, one person was asking to get something that had a great deal of experience, so that meant lots of monsters to kill. And another person asked for something that had better real loot. So I brought up the Doom of Carascalebrin, because that seemed to fit those patterns in there. Mm-hmm. That has better loot than most skirmishes. So we ran that. We got past the first encounter. We did the first 2 areas. Then in the during the third assault, alas, the guard at the North Gate got killed. And you know what happened after the guard died, and soon afterwards the NPC died. So
yes. Oh.
Yeah, so, and as soon as that happened, we all ran for the location where Celebrimbor is, so that we could loot the encounter chest that was there, so we could at least get a consolation prize before we were booted out of the instance.
Yeah.
Then after that, I said, okay, that didn't work right, so we'll just finish on a winning note, and we ran Breaching the Necromancer's Gate, which was, of course, a lot easier, and we did get a couple people who are now much closer to level 150 than they were when we started.
Yeah.
And that concludes my week in gaming. And we actually have 2 comments for this week. First of all, we have a comment from episode 550, and this comes from Ed Evans.
Yay! Somebody was listening and responded. Okay, tell us.
All right. I have what I consider a holly tree, but I don't think it's 3 stories tall. Some years, while it's blooming, it's so full of bees that I can hear the trees from the distance. It seems kind of entish.
I love that.
Oh boy, if you think that's bad. If you ever heard a tree full of cicadas.
I have. I would rather listen to bees.
Yes, I remember once walking through the park and every single tree in the park was like full of cicadas. Boy, they make quite a sound.
Yes, they do.
Yes. But anyway, in this case, apparently they have bees in there. And yes, so they have a holly tree that he doesn't know how tall it is, but yes, not 3 stories tall is what he's saying for that one. All right, so that's it. And we also have a comment from Ornez. And Ornez is actually another name for Ravi.
Nice.
So what does Ornez say?
Ornez says, perhaps the difference in Dol Amroth fishing is due to the season. Maybe they get their good fish in the spring. to explain Pineleaf's fishing data.
Yes,
King's
when I was
Gondor.
yes, because King's Gondor has a very different fishing table than the other areas, so suggesting that maybe it has to do with spring being the season when you're there for the first time, and it is summer when you return there much later. So I was thinking, now I don't think that's the reason, but I think it's a wonderful headcanon for the whole thing.
I mean, it's as good a reason as anything else, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what the devs were thinking when they picked the tables for it. So,
Yeah, that I don't know. I believe that the table they use is that they just use the same table that they used in Gundabad. As for I haven't tested out the War of Three Peaks area yet. I guess I have to check to see if that has the Gundabad tables or if that has the old the old Dol Amroth tables. I guess I'm going to have to find that out soon enough.
Yeah, sounds like we have a plan for the next time we go fishing.
For next time we go fishing. That's right. And we also had an email from Ravi, and
I will read that for us.
you read this, and this was a long one. In fact, the two of the items that we had earlier from the new player question and the reminiscing were from this letter.
Yes, this was the gasoline for our car.
Yes.
To keep it running today. So, Ravi says, "Hello, dear LOTRO players. How are you? We're doing pretty good today. I am Ravi, short for Ravioli, lol, a new listener and a relatively new player of LOTRO. I started out almost 2 years ago, about a month before the 15th anniversary, but I had no idea about any of the anniversary gifts or free-to-play bonuses that were coming up and didn't plan ahead at all. LOTRO is my first ever MMO and my first video game. The only reason why I came here was because Corey Olsen, the Tolkien Professor's podcast, had seduced me into it. Haha. I've been taking it slow. My eldest character is around 120 and recently arrived in the Vales of Anduin. I've got one there too. It's a beautiful area. I discovered your podcast because I finally scraped together enough LOTRO points to get Before the Shadow to spice things up for my alts. I played through it and loved it, so I looked for podcasts about LOTRO discussing the Before the Shadow zone and its story. Imagine my surprise when I scrolled around and realized that the podcast goes back a decade. Since then, I caught up on the recent episodes and went back to start at the beginning. As of writing this letter, I'm somewhere between episode 76 and episode 80, and I plan to catch up in no time. What pushed me to write a letter to y'all is a sense of scale, if you will. Everyone can see that LOTRO is massive in size. It is also massive in time. It's been so interesting to go back 10 years and hear how the gaming community was back then, and even at that point, the hosts often talked about much earlier periods of LOTRO's early days. It's almost like living in the third age, then overhearing a conversation from the second age discussing the events of the first age. Thusly, I learned quite a lot. And this is where we got our reminiscing about. So apparently at some point Strider wasn't the one who rescues you from jail and Archit. What? It's been so impactful to open your eyes in the world for the first time, meet Aragon, and imprint on him instantly. Strider, my bestie, my king, anything for you, any menial task of a quest, I will never complain. And yet, it used to be a different experience early on. I wonder what made them change it up. Dear hosts, if any of you experienced this episode before that change, could you please talk about how it was before and what emotional reaction you had? Thanks. We did that. I also feel like the podcast reflects the evolution of the community as well. Those old episodes feel so grand. Several people discuss important topics very seriously and in depth, with a feeling of being interconnected with a big community. Nowadays, it feels more like a group of friends. Cozy, comfortable, personal, leaving unspoken the things that must have been spoken of 1,000 times before, but also kind of isolated. Pineleaf is still there, though. Yes, he is. He is the stay of this show. Talk about evergreen. Smiley face.
Yeah. I guess that makes me the holly, yes.
Yes.
I guess more of a pine, actually.
The ponderosa. No,
yes,
not the ponderosa. The sequoia of the show.
The sequoia of the show.
Pineleaf is the sequoia of the show. In general, I feel that observing the evolution of the podcast answers some questions that I didn't know I had, at least when it comes to the social aspect of the game. Anytime I wonder, why doesn't anyone make a gang of Bjornings to roleplay as bears and live in the forest, the answer seems to be, everyone who wanted to do it already did it years ago. I wonder, what kinds of opportunities for group play come up these days? I assume it's probably raiding and music. I also wonder if I would be interested to try. However, I feel that most surviving groups are so well established and synergized that coming out of nowhere and knocking on doors as a total noob, especially if you don't know you will even like the activity to stick around and make it worth the group's time teaching you the ropes, is kind of a bad tone. Yeah, I did have an experience with group play in LOTRO, and it was glorious. Last year, I took part in the annual chicken run in August to become the crosser of roads. I think it was the most fun I have had in the game so far. I'm working to level up my hunter on Landerval to cap. I hope to be a chicken tender this year, if they hold the event again. I don't really have a good ending for the letter to sum up my ramblings. I enjoy your podcast. It's a reliable source of news and pleasant listen, with great chemistry of hosts and a good cheer. It's given me an interesting insight into the wider LOTRO world. Thank you all for that. Thank you for your time, Ravi the Eater.
That is quite a letter. And one note on there, when we were talking about kinships earlier, the one kinship that I would recommend for Ravi would, of course, be Mythgard. Because he was attracted by Olsen, Corey Olsen, and that is Corey's. That's obviously Corey's kinship because Mythgard he runs the Mythgard Academy and all. So yes, I would say that's probably the most likely one, and we do actually occasionally bring in some new players into our what we call the Friday night fights. Is that something we have every Friday in there where we get together in there? We actually have a group that meets on every other Wednesday called the Hard Traveler, where we started. We are currently in Cardline, so you would have to get up to about level 20-ish in order to catch up with us. But that is a group that is running on Fridays where we're all going through the early content from first we started in Swanfleet, then we went into Cardline and going on through there. So that's something you could consider if you want to be able to catch up quickly and join that group. We also have the possibility is Friday Night Fights. That's open up to quite a range of players, and we have people coming in from all different levels in there. We'll probably might be able to have a niche where you can get into there, and we just meet and then form groups and then run instances together.
Yes, and what you need to know about Friday Night Fights is that they meet at the tower in Rivendell. So when you cross the bridge going towards the last lonely house, there's a little tower pavilion thing off to the left, and that's where they meet up.
Yeah, I always thought of that as a gazebo of sorts.
Well, it's like a gazebo, but it's on a pedestal, and it's pretty tall. And I think they call it a tower. What do they call it?
Well, I think it's the spire of meeting. The spire of meeting,
and that's where you.
Yeah. Yes, that's where we all meet and gather for it. And so we do have a tradition that there's a group of about 60-ish characters that are often in there, and they often meet in the trees near there because that's where they eventually gather. The 140 pluses tend to meet at the spire itself, and I don't know where people or other levels usually go. So we try to find a place for you whenever it goes. I don't know how many characters you have, what levels they are, or anything like that, but usually the recommendation is try to come with the player that you would like to play, and then maybe we could find some accommodation with it. So it's a very nice group in which to start out with grouping with people.
Yes, and Mythgard has connections on both Discord as far as a server where you can talk with kinmates, and then they also have one on Facebook. So it's kind of a pick your pleasure for the social media and connecting ways.
Yes. If you would like to send us an email, you can send it to podcast@lotraplayers.com.
And yes, we do check it.
Yes. The Players Alliance has 2 shows. On Saturdays at 8:30 p.m. US Eastern Time, we have LOTRO Players News, and we record DDO Players News when Drac is available. You can join us for our shows at lotraplayers.com/live. And that's all for tonight. And this is Pineleaf Needles reminding you to skirmish responsibly.